This will be a demonstration of some basic character modeling techniques. I'll start by setting the project. And next I'll import some images that I've prepared previously for assistance in modeling. First I'll switch to the foreview and add a side image to my side camera by clicking the image plane button and choosing my side image. So that drops the image into the viewport and it locks it to the camera, so when I move the camera around, the image moves with the camera. I'll drop another image into the front view, and from the perspective view I can see that the images line up. Now I carefully drew these with some guidelines. You can see these red lines indicated where parts of the character go in the front and side views so that I would be sure that they would match up vertically. If the images are not the same size vertically, or if the features don't match up, then you'll end up with a model that doesn't match one view or the other, and it'll make modeling more difficult. So drawing guidelines is a useful way to deal with that. Now my images are also a bit too small, so I'm going to change the scale of them. I can select the image planes and just scale them up using the scale tool. I can move them using the move tool. I will align the feet to the world ground plane, or 0 on the y-axis. That looks pretty good. In the front view, my character is maybe not quite centered. And in the side view, I want to move the character back just a little bit. Now I also don't want these images interfering with modeling, so I don't want to see them in other views. Each of these has an attribute in the attribute editor, whether they display looking through the camera only or in all views. So I'll change that to looking through camera. Now if I create an object, you'll see that the image plane can actually get in front of the object in this viewport and block it. So I do want to go back one step. I'll show both of these and move them out of the way. So I'll take the front image and slide it back behind where the character is going to end up. I'll take the side image and move it way off to the side, and then again for both of these change them to looking through camera only. Now those shouldn't interfere as I'm modeling. Now I have the basic setup complete for modeling according to an image that I drew, and I'm ready to start modeling. With every character that I create, almost exclusively I start with a cube because it's the simplest piece of geometry. From just a basic cube, I always position it and scale it and model just the cube without extra detail to roughly approximate the main mass of the character. This character is sort of bottom heavy with an odd neck and head, so I'll stick to making this roughly the size of the torso. And once that's complete, I can start adding detail. I'm going to use the modeling toolkit to do most of the work because it has some nice shortcuts for component selection modes. It has some tools that are worth having around and having easy access to, and it has symmetry and some other constraints that are useful when you're modeling. I'll start with the multi-cut tool, control click, and also hold down shift so that I can insert an edge loop in the exact middle of this new block and do some sculpting. Now I still don't have enough detail to make a really convincing character, so rather than try to force this, I will add some more detail and sculpt again. Now I'll use the Extrude tool to start adding the shoulders and the neck. I will extrude again. Extrude. And at every stage, I'm making sure that I model the new details to completion before I continue. Otherwise I end up with more and more points that are not in their final positions, and it makes the rest of the modeling much more difficult. So I'll continue extruding. Now my head drawing is a little bit lopsided, so I'll try to estimate where the head should be. Now I have the body mostly blocked in. I've got the shape of the torso, the shape of the head and neck, and that's the core of the character. It doesn't have arms or legs yet, so at this point I will add arms and legs, but first I want to turn on symmetry. So I'll select some edge that's along the center line, like this one, and choose Symmetry, Object X. I've chosen X because my character faces forward on Z, faces up on Y, and side to side is the X direction. So any component that I select on one side should be mirrored on the other side. Now I'll select this face and start extruding the legs. And you'll see that it wants to keep those faces together by default, so I need to turn off this Keep Faces Together option. And then I can continue extruding. Now I'm going to continue by sculpting the arms. Again, I'm using a limited set of tools. I'm using Extrude, Multi-Cut, Move, Rotate, Scale, and not much else. At any point during the modeling process, I may also want to preview my model as a smooth mesh. I can do that by pressing 3 on the keyboard, or by pressing 2 to see the smooth preview with the low-res model as an outline around it. I also like to sometimes turn on interactive lighting when I have no lights so that I can see the model as a silhouette. This helps me identify problems in a way that I may not notice them when I'm modeling using the regular tools. Like I can see that the armpits are a little bit strange. The shape of the head looks pretty good. And the body is about the right shape and size. So there's one area that looks like it needs a little bit of help. Now at this point my character is all blocked in. I would continue from here with the same strategies, the same tools, and do things like add more detail, add toes and fingers, add a face. Now in order to finalize this model, I'll go back to the channel box and take a look. All of the operations that I've done are now represented by new nodes in the history of this object. For animation, I really don't want all those extra nodes in there, and generally the first thing that I do when I'm done with the model is to delete the history. So that is File, so that is Edit, Delete by Type, History. All of the additional nodes are now deleted and their effects are baked into the model. Now one last step before I'm ready to rig it and animate is to actually apply the smoothing. If I'm just looking at the smooth preview mode, then smoothing is just a preview and it won't render properly. I can change the number of divisions in my smooth node, or I can actually select the poly smooth face node in the channel box and look at divisions, or look at it in the attribute editor and see what sort of options I have. At this point I may also use some of the sculpting tools. Again, I want object X symmetry, and any painting that I do will be reflected on both sides. If I click and drag along the surface, the brush sculpts the surface normally. If I control click and drag, it inverts the brush, so I can push, for example, I can pull out on the surface by clicking and dragging, or I can push into the surface by control clicking. I can also press shift, and that turns the brush to smoothing mode, so I can smooth out surfaces. And generally I like to work with a fairly small strength value on the brush, so that changes that I make are not too dramatic. And with a little bit of sculpting using just the sculpt tool, I've gotten my model into slightly better shape. Now, that also did add some additional nodes, so I'll be sure to delete history again before I attempt to rig this model for animation.